Welcome back to this week's episode of Hormones, Metabolism, and You. I am super excited, you guys. I did a poll and I asked you guys what you wanted to know about, and you said gut health. So I went and found this amazing gut health microbiologist. His name is Kiran, and he was on my good friend McCole's podcast. He has a background, so he's a research microbiologist, and he has done a lot of stuff with gut health. And so we have a ton of rapid fire questions I'm going to ask him at the end. But he and I were just talking before we even started this about some gut health stuff, and I got so excited. So thank you for taking the time to come on our podcast and talk to us about gut health. Will you kind of tell everyone a little bit about yourself? How did you get into gut health, and what do you do every day?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's a pleasure to be here for one. Thank you so much for having me. It's always a pleasure to be able to nerd out a little bit on the microbiome, right? It's a never-ending conversation that is so impactful for people. So I got my start. I always knew I was going to be in science. Both my parents are from the field of science in one way or the other. My mom is a medical doctor, and my dad was a microelectronics engineer. And I feel like I got a little mix of both with the systems engineering type of mindset, and then the biological clinical aspect of using that systems engineering mindset, right? And then I was always a big fan of pursuing new frontiers. And the world of microbiology is and has always been an area of new frontiers, right? Because it's an invisible world to us, and yet it affects us in every way possible that we could think of, whether it's in our environment, in our ecosystems, within our bodies, and so on. And so that became really interesting to me as an area to pursue. So I went into microbiology, and then the Human Microbiome Project kicked off, and I was like, oh my God, that is going to be the most impactful thing for the next couple of decades, to really understand what is actually happening in our system and what lives within us. Right? Imagine that we knew more about what was at the bottom of the deepest recesses of the ocean than we did of what was right in our own guts, right? So that was just so baffling to me, and so I dove right into the world of the human microbiome. And you mentioned research microbiologist. What that usually means is at an academic or other institutional levels, we do a lot of the basic research work. That is, a lot of the mechanistic type studies, a lot of the very grounded microbiological type of work that you do to understand bacteria, the way they function, what triggers them, what impacts them, and all that. We develop a lot of techniques around studying bacteria as well. But most of my work actually left the lab and has been in clinical research. I actually have done way more clinical studies and published more clinical studies than I have done basic benchtop research. So it's been really exciting because I definitely feel it's a forefront to be in the world of the microbiome as a microbiologist, getting to see this from that perspective.
Love that. So you were telling me beforehand too that you worked for or you helped co-found Microbiome Labs. You sold that, and now you're doing some other testing. But we kind of got on this conversation prior to this talking about how you feel like a lot of times with gut health stuff, things are very pathogen heavy. People are, if you've ever had a gut health test and you're listening to this podcast, a lot of times there's this huge kill phase that people do. And you were saying how sometimes you feel like there's a lot of killing that happens, and then we kill a lot of commensal or good bacteria. And you were explaining to me how there's this way that we can actually use bacteria to go after other bacteria. So I think this is all very fascinating. And my mind's just like, so talk to people about, I guess, let's go down that pathway, but in a way that people can understand. So like, why do you think the microbiome is so important? And then I want people to understand this too, who have done this before. When you have bad bacteria, they're not always just really, not all bacteria is bad, and bad and good need to be balanced, right? So let's kind of talk about that.
Yeah, yeah, and all of this context matters a lot in the world of microbiology and the microbiome, right? So first, to unpack a little bit about why the microbiome is so important, just to put a little point on that. I was at one of the labs that I worked in at University of Iowa, where I went to school, was part of the Human Genome Project, right? So this was back in the late '90s, and the Human Genome Project, the promise was to decode the entire human genome. And as a result of that, we're going to find the gene for virtually every chronic disease we deal with. And then maybe there's a way of manipulating the genes and altering the genes or gene response. And as a result, we can go after disease, right? So the predictions were that we would have well over 250,000 functional genes because we are very complex creatures, right? At that point, they had sequenced Drosophilas, which is the fruit flies, and a whole bunch of things. And those are simplistic creatures that have 25, 30, 40,000 functional genes. So we've got to be 5 to 10 times more than that. They sequence the entire human genome and they find that we've got like 22,000 functional genes, right? Compare that to like an earthworm with 30,000 functional genes. So then the big question was, wait a minute, how is it that we're so sophisticated and we do so much and we have so much capability and adaptability and we hardly have any genes to code for any of this? And so that was actually part of the impetus of understanding the human microbiome, because as it turns out, the human microbiome, which is all the microbes and all of the genetic elements that exist within you, and it's in the gut is the biggest area of it, but you've got microbes everywhere, right? You've got microbes in your brain. We used to think our cerebral spinal fluid was sterile. We used to think other parts of the body were sterile. They're not, right? Everything has microbes in it. And those microbes house over 2.5 million genes for us, right? So the microbial population in our system is a massive reservoir of functionality and capability for the human. So then this drove a new outlook on what a human actually is, right? Our old view of human biology and physiology has to change because we are a lot more of something called a holobiont, which is a superorganism. We are essentially a walking, talking rainforest. We have all of these thousands of minuscule and minor ecosystems that have to work together in order to perpetuate the health of the whole, right? So the gut microbes have to work with the lung microbes that have to work with the skin microbes and the microbes on your gallbladder and your liver. Like there are microbes everywhere and they dictate how each organ system functions. And if the microbes in that organ system change, it changes how the organ functions, right? And that's the part that's really crazy. And we see that in conditions like SIBO, for example, right? SIBO is a microbial shift in the small intestine that completely changes how the small intestine functions now, and it's not doing what it's supposed to do, right? And you get all this gas and bloating and distension and liver dysfunction and all of that. So we cannot overstate the importance of understanding our ecosystem, supporting it, and allowing it to function the way we are designed to function. We are one of the most diverse ecosystems on the planet, right? When you look at all animal in the animal kingdoms and all that, right? So there's only about 3 or 4 classes of animals that have higher diversity in their microbiomes than humans do, and that's one of the ways in which we evolve to be so adaptable to so many different environments, right? So we cannot overstate the importance of the microbiome. Now, the other thing you touched on about the ecosystem and this unfortunate focus around pathogens and bad bacteria being present and the cause of many of the things we experience, the symptoms and so on. This is the pathogen centric view, right, of what's happening in the microbiological environment. And this is, and I understand it because most of medicine, and you know this well as a trained physician, most of medicine views problems that are associated with bacteria or microbes as pathogenic microbes driving a problem, right? They're producing toxins, they're causing infections, they're doing this, that, and the other. And so when we think about the gut and we think about this complex ecosystem that exists in the gut, and then we go, okay, but something's wrong with my gut. It's not functioning properly. Well, it must be bad microbes in there driving the issue. When in actual fact, with the microbiome, it's not who's there that's important, it's who's not there that's even more important, right? And who else is there with that one microbe. So the context really matters, right? So we all have pathogens in our gut, and that's perfectly normal. And most pathogens, up to a certain level, actually are beneficial and functional. They keep the immune system functioning properly. They continuously trigger the secretion of things like secretory IgA. They upregulate immune function, like getting Tregs up so that we have better tolerance of things. All the while, they're being utilized by the body for the benefit, but they're being controlled by the good commensal bacteria. When those good commensal bacteria's numbers go down, that's when they have the opportunity to overpopulate and create a problem. And so, more often than not, one of the best ways to truly improve the microbiome and all the impacts that it has is to shift the population dynamics and bring back the higher prevalence of the beneficial microbes, right? So, that pathogen centric view of like, it must be a bad bacteria in there and we're going to go in and kill it will more often do more damage than good because you're going to kill lots of stuff while you're trying to kill that one thing, right?
So that's so interesting. So I want to make sure I got this right. You said that we have about 22,000 functional genes as humans,
Yeah.
but that our microbes, like in our body, have 2.5 million.
Yeah. Right. Over
So our
150
microbes have
times.
100 times more genes than we do.
Yes.
And yet we are not taught in medical school or in any sort of provider school anywhere in the world that I know of, other than maybe naturopaths, anything about the gut microbiome.
No.
Nothing about nutrition, anything like that.
Nothing like that.
Okay,
It
got it.
arguably it's like 90% of our function, and we don't really think about it that much.
90% of our function. And the genes that come from, I guess, microbes,
Hmm.
you are telling me not just in your gut, but everywhere. Cerebral spinal fluid, just kind of wherever, our skin, anywhere.
Yeah, yeah, everywhere. And if you think about, like, let's just take a few basic functions, right, on our skin, for example. Um, a few things we want out of our skin. We want our skin to act like a really strong barrier, right? We don't want things to be able to penetrate through, and we also don't want moisture to penetrate out. So we have this ceramide layer within our skin, which is a fatty acid layer that protects us and acts as a barrier function. Then we have tight junctions between the skin cells and all that. The formation and the management of the ceramide layer and the tight junctions are highly dependent on microbes that live on our skin. And if you have an overabundance of microbes, like say Staph aureus instead of Staph epidermidis, then you tend to start getting a disruption in the tight junction because Staph aureus is trying to make its way in between the cells a little bit deeper. And then that causes and triggers your immune system to go, hey, wait, something's wrong with that part of the skin. The immune system shows up and starts attacking it. And then you start getting a lesion that we call eczema or dermatitis, right? So the presence of the wrong microbe can change the function of the skin and make it super permeable. You have this leaky skin issue. And then now, not only do you have this super irritating and uncomfortable lesion on your skin, it also becomes one of the primary drivers of development of food allergies, right? Which is like completely, like you wouldn't. It's not intuitive, right? You don't think that. Wait a minute, eczema on my skin can lead to food allergies. As it turns out, kids who have eczema early on in life, as babies and toddlers, they have 8 times more likely to develop serious food allergies than kids who do not have eczema. And the reason for that is the penetration of foodborne antigens through that permeable skin entering into circulation, not through the gut. Through the gut, your body has systems to build tolerance, right? We call it oral tolerance. For that reason, when you go through the skin, it creates a hypersensitivity response to that antigen, that protein, or whatever it may be. And as a result, you build an allergy to it, right? So this is something called the atopic march, which is starting with atopic dermatitis, which starts with dysbiosis on your skin microbiome, leads to lifelong struggle with very serious food allergies, right? So I like using that example because it helps people wrap their head around how a simple change in the ecosystem of a part of your skin can lead to you struggling for the next 20 years with severe peanut allergy and anaphylactic risk and all kinds of crazy stuff, right? From this one ecological change.
And so it's because something that gets on your skin changes the microbiome of your skin. That can then change the microbiome of your gut.
Yeah, so it can have that impact, right? So for example, if we're not careful with our skin, so when a baby's born, let's say the baby's not born through the vaginal canal, born C-section, right? Right off the bat, the baby's not getting the appropriate exposure to mom's vaginal bacteria, which is really important to coat the skin of the baby. And then the skin to skin contact with mom and dad early on is also really important to transfer the beneficial microbes from the parent's skin to the child's skin, right? So to provide that stabilization of the ecosystem on the skin. So this is a C-section baby coming out, not getting the right exposure. The baby's cleaned very quickly, right? And so the baby's not really getting any good exposure. If mom and dad don't do a lot of skin to skin contact and they bathe the baby too much using, consumer products that have parabens and all kinds of stuff in it, right? Then you're going to really harm the baby's skin microbiome. So now the baby has a dysfunctional skin microbiome where they have a higher growth of microbes like Staph aureus. That then compromises the barrier function of the baby's skin, right? As a result, things can penetrate through the skin and enter into circulation, like allergens that are in the air, right? Food-borne allergens, environmental allergens. Penetration of that allergen into the skin can trigger a localized and then systemic inflammatory response, which can then also impact the gut, because the gut being the central command center of the immune system, right? So now you've got localized inflammation, gut inflammation, the development of hypersensitivities, all of that happening in process because the skin microbiome was not managed well, right? And so an example of how you can get a cascading effect of a number of things that fall apart just from a change in the ecosystem in one part of the body.
Yeah, and that's interesting because I always thought about it the reverse way, to be honest with you. So I always thought, when I see these teenagers that have terrible acne, you think, okay, well, let's look at their diet. And if we're eating nothing but gummy worms and, Red Hots and Chick-fil-A sandwiches that are fried, and, just whatever, and then they have terrible acne, I always thought about, well, it's because their gut microbiome is mad because they have too much sugar and not enough fiber, and all the bad stuff is growing and the good stuff is dying. And so then that manifests as skin issues. But you're saying it can also go the other way, where you end up with skin issues and then they have manifestations of their gut. And then that can kind of probably, I'm sure, feed back to their skin. And it's just like this big cycle. Same thing with your hormones.
Totally, yeah. Gut skin access is a two-way conversation, and in the case of acne, the gut is implicated, right? And because in part, acne being a chronic inflammatory condition, the perpetuation of the inflammation starts in the gut, and but you do have to have a trigger locally in the skin, right? And in the case of acne, it's the clogged pore, the overpopulation of P. acnesis in that part of the skin, which is, and certain serotypes of P. acnesis can trigger an immune response. Then the sebaceous gland goes, oh my God, I got to protect this. And so that it's overproducing sebum. And then the gut, sensing all of that, is upregulating the inflammatory responses. And especially if their gut is damaged, it's going to, you know, trigger a much more inflammatory response. And this is why you see in the diet associated with acne studies, there's about 52 studies on diet and acne. Removing dairy and removing gluten almost always has a positive impact, right? Like across the board. And the best diet for healthy skin across all of those studies was always the Mediterranean diet, right? So healthy fats, lots of antioxidants, lots of fiber, lots of polyphenols, and basic things that are really good for the gut end up being really good for the skin. Now, I also have a patent on a gut skin axis probiotic, and the reason why we got a patent for it because we made some discoveries around how a healthy gut can actually improve the skin, and as it turns out. What we found was that in a healthy gut, you end up with a lot of a particular type of rumnococcus. This is a type of microbe in the large bowel that produces short chain fatty acids, right? So it's producing butyrate, propionate, and acetate. In the case of this rumnococcus, it's actually producing a high amount of acetate. Now, acetate is a short chain fatty acid that leaves the gut and goes to all of these peripheral tissues. It's one of those tissues that can, one of those compounds from the gut that can actually control the growth of dysfunctional bacteria in the skin and reduce inflammation and sebum production in the skin. right? So this thing that's manufactured in the gut by just microbes manages the health and functionality of your skin. And we can't make acetate ourselves, right? Nor do we get it in any abundant form in the diet. It has to be manufactured by microbes in the gut.
And so you have to have fiber. What did you say you have to have? It's called ruminococcus. You have to have fiber.
Ruminicox.
What else do you have to
Yep.
have?
So prebiotics and fiber are both really effective. Prebiotics, typically the type of prebiotic is called oligosaccharides. They're often abbreviated FOS for fructooligosaccharides or XOS for xylooligosaccharides. Those oligosaccharides are essentially very complex carbohydrate structures that only certain bacteria can metabolize because they have the right enzymes for it, right? And as a result, they specifically feed certain groups of beneficial bacteria like Akkermansia, like Ruminococcus, like Bifidobacterium, and so on. And then having polyphenols and antioxidants within the diet is also really important, and that can have a huge implication on skin health because from the gut side of it, what the gut is essentially doing for skin is controlling and modulating inflammatory responses on the skin, right? And then what the skin microbiome is doing is trying to reduce the triggers for inflammation and damage to the skin. So you do want both of them to be working properly together in order to have the most healthy skin.
Can you tell people listening what a polyphenol means? It means color of the rainbow, right? Very bright, colorful food.
Yeah, yeah. So phenolics are compounds that tend to come from plants, and a polyphenol is going to be one that has a big variety of phenolics. So really, at the end of the day, that like you said, it comes from colored fruits and vegetables, right? So plant-based nutrients that are typically found in the pigment component of it. So that's why we say eat your color, eat the rainbow. What they're really saying is trying to get more polyphenols, and then a subset of polyphenols are called carotenoids, which are really powerful antioxidants, right? So those are things people have heard of like beta carotene, lycopene, astaxanthin, zeaxanthin. These are all things that are found in the deep colors of fruits and vegetables. And those things are very powerful in terms of feeding the right bacteria, reducing the oxidative stress, creating a better environment in the gut for the good bacteria to flourish, and creating a competitive environment to suppress the bad bacteria.
Okay. So all just very fascinating stuff. And again, it all goes together. And this is what I tell people all the time. I had terrible acne as a child. I had bad acne as a teenager, even in my 20s. And then I got really bad Hashimoto's and I decided I was going to stop eating dairy, although I loved cheese and I thought it was a food group. When I met my husband, I would eat like 10 different cheeses for dinner. I stopped eating dairy, and within like 2 weeks, I just didn't get a pimple anymore. It was the craziest thing. And so I haven't eaten dairy in years. And like every now and then, my husband will try to talk me into having cheese or something. And I'm like, it's not worth it. Every time I eat anything, I end up with like terrible acne. It's the craziest thing. Any kind of dairy. So I truly believe that. I have a ton of Hashimoto's patients that I do labs on, and I just saw a girl today. She's 23, and she's kind of like, yeah, you're a little crazy, but her TPO antibody was 1500 in
Wow.
March. And I saw her today, so this is July, so 4 months later. The only thing she'll do as far as listening to me, we are working on cleaning out her gut,
Hmm.
increasing her fiber, some things. But I was like, will you please just stop eating dairy? I tried to do the gluten too, and she was like, but I was like, okay, just no dairy. I gave her a little bit of LDN, and we're working on her gut. Today,
Hmm.
4 months later, that was it. And by the way, she's also working this summer, at a bar and like not sleeping well, not doing the things I
Sure,
would recommend.
yeah.
But her TPO today was 533, so down
Wow.
1,000 points.
Wow.
Probably sleeping less and drinking more alcohol than I would like her to. But I mean, just from like changing a few things in her diet, right? Like her
Yeah.
dairy intake, her skin. So she had pretty bad acne, and her skin already looks so much better. So it's crazy.
That's amazing. Yeah, you see you see that minuscule improvements that become habitual, which is good, right? That's the important thing. So let's say the focus is just fiber. One of the things I tell people is I'm like, okay, if you want to just start on doing something for your gut, right, to improve it, just take fiber before every meal. 5 to 7 grams of fiber with every meal. It'll have a number of benefits. Number one, it's going to reduce the amount of food you eat for that meal, right? Because fiber is going to provide the satiety signal. It's going to slow down your gastric movement or and motility overall, and it's going to make you feel full better. So you're going to eat less calories. You're going to get less sugar and things like that you're taking in. But number two, it's going to feed the microbes in the distal part of the small bowel and the large bowel, and they will convert that to these really, really important compounds like short chain fatty acids and urolithins, and that has massive implications for your overall health, right? So fiber, for example, and I love that you recommend people to consume fiber, because we're in this weird era where like there are these crazy diet things, it drives me crazy. And I get people like saying, well, you don't need fiber, you can just eat meat,
Mhm.
right? Like just all day
Carnivore
long eat
diet?
steak and don't eat fiber. Right, exactly. And
Yeah.
it's like,
Mhm.
okay, let's look at the research. Well, okay, so the fiber is probably one of the most well-studied macronutrients there is, right? So the latest meta-analysis study on fiber, which involved almost 1 million subjects in all of the papers that they included in this meta-analysis study, they found quite accurately that every 10 grams of fiber you add to your daily diet, it reduces your relative mortality risk by 10%, right? That's massive. And that is linear up to almost 40 grams of fiber. So if you increase your fiber intake by 10 grams a day to get to 40 grams as your daily intake, you will reduce your relative mortality risk, all cause mortality. This is dying from anything, by almost 40%, which is absolutely insane, right? Nothing else does that. And then you think about it and you go, okay, wait, why? Why would fiber give you that kind of magical benefit, right? And the thing is, we don't even digest the fiber, right? It's not like we're pulling nutrients out of it. It goes all to feed the microbiome, which to me then it underscores the importance of a healthy, diverse microbiome for overall health. And in your world that you work in endocrinology, and I'm sure you deal with a lot of women going into perimenopause and all that, right? That is such a critical time, because one of the side effects of having a reduction in production of estrogen and all that is you lose diversity in your microbiome, and your intestinal permeability goes up, right? This is part of the reason why women will start getting metabolically dysfunctional. They'll start putting on more weight. There's mood alterations because there's gut-brain axis alterations. And then there's more inflammation. There's more chronic low-grade inflammation that leads to higher risk for osteoporosis, cardiovascular disease, and everything else. So there's so many implications here for that. And as women hit their early 40s, increasing fiber intake alone could kind of help with a lot of the issues that they may face over the next few years.
Can you take fiber pills or do you have to eat it? Is taking fiber cheating?
No, not at all. My goal per day is 50 grams of fiber, right? That's where I like to be as a base. I know I can quite easily, without thinking about it, get about 20-25 grams from food. And then I supplement the other 20-25 grams. Just psyllium husk, and various fiber blends that I get. I like a mix of soluble and insoluble fibers, about 70% soluble, about 30% insoluble. There's a number of good fiber products on the market, and to me, the best way to take it, and my favorite way, is to take it right before a meal. Right, 2-3 meals a day if you're eating, get 5 to 7 grams as a supplement right before the meal, and then often I will do another like 8 to 10 grams of fiber like a couple hours before bed after I've eaten dinner, and you wake up the next morning and man, you have the best bowel movements ever, right? We all know, like, those bowel movements that make you feel skinny afterwards, right? That kind of one, it's fantastic. Yeah, you feel so good and energized in the morning.
So, what is your favorite psyllium husk or what is your favorite soluble and insoluble? And are you just mixing this with water? Are you taking this in a capsule form? Like, how are you doing this?
Yeah, I use powder. So my favorite one is from it's the Organic India brand. What I like about it is it's just psyllium husk. and it's organic. There's no flavoring. There's nothing in there. It's not a great experience, right? Because you mix it into a couple of tablespoons in water. It kind of partially dissolves a little bit, and then you just chug it down, right? It doesn't taste good. It doesn't necessarily feel good. So people, if people are looking for a great taste experience, they're not going to get it. But it's so important, right? It's arguably one of the nutritionally one of the more important things you can do for yourself.
Can you add it to a shake?
You can, yeah. You can absolutely add it to a shake. You can add it to a blender if you're doing like a protein drink. One of my new things over the last about 3 months I started was to do 10 grams of fiber, 20 grams of protein as my first thing in the morning. With a cup of coffee, of course, and then I just have some whey protein, some fiber, mix into the same thing, chug it down. And the beauty of that is like it gives me enough energy and all that, and I feel so satiated for most of the day that I don't even really start to think about eating till like 3 o'clock. And I'm working and I'm diligent and I have meetings and all this stuff going on all the time, and it's great. It works well for me because it makes my gut feel really good. And I'm full and I'm happy. And the fiber really does impact your brain and your mood and your chemistry as well there.
Okay, so I'm wondering if I can put this organic India fiber in, like, I drink bone broth every morning, and I know that would make it taste very good, but I heat up bone broth every morning. So I'm very into Ayurveda medicine, and so I'm very into doshas, and so my dosha type
Yeah.
requires bone broth, like warm liquids in the morning, followed by green juice. So I am a bone broth every morning, green juice following that before I allow myself to even have coffee. My husband thinks I'm insane, but like that's what I do. So I'm wondering if I can just dump my fiber in my bone broth and just down the hatch, or even in my green juice, just get it
You
in.
totally could. Yeah, you totally could. It won't really impact the flavor of the bone broth if you
No, I
love the
don't.
flavor of the bone broth. It'll just add a
No.
little bit of grittiness to it, and it's such a great thing to do in the morning. To me, it's such a great way because so your microbiome is a diurnal system, right? So it has a sleep and awake cycle, and then at night when you're asleep, and assuming your circadian rhythm is working right, all of these housekeeping microbes wake up, right? They're essentially doing a lot of the cleanup and repair and all that, and they're producing things like brain-derived neurotropic factors, so your brain can repair itself, and it's upregulating autophagia and mitophagia, so it's repairing your cells and mitochondria and all of that stuff. So that's great. You want that happening at night. That's part of the importance of sleeping. But when you wake up and you get that cortisol awakening response, your body and your microbiome goes, okay, we're awake, right? Let's get to work. Let's get some nutrients in. And then providing fiber to those microbes first thing in the morning is really great because what it does is it feeds what we call the primary digesters, right? Within the microbiome, there are several levels of digesting bacteria. The primary fermenters or primary digesters break down the big macromolecules, right? So the carbohydrates, the fibers, the prebiotics, and all that. They make byproducts that then feed the second layer of microbes. And then they might metabolize those, and then they feed the tertiary or the third layer of microbes, and so on. So all of that is starting to happen over the next 5, 6 hours. All of these microbes in your system are awakening, right? And they're doing their job. And every time they have their source of food, they become more active, and so you want that kind of progression to occur within your gut because then what you're doing is you're really diversifying the broadest spectrum of microbes within your gut. If you wake up in the morning and all you eat is fat, for example, right? There's all these kind of weird protocols out there where you wake up in the morning and you
Or you
douse
just
a
eat
big thing of
protein,
fat.
just
Uh,
protein, no,
no,
nothing else.
or just protein, right? Yeah, or just protein. Then there's very few microbes that actually break down and work with fat, and very few microbes that actually break down and work with protein. And in fact, you're not really even supposed to get much protein into your large bowel. Most of it is supposed to be properly digested and assimilated by your own body. So you're actually not giving the microbes anything. And so now you've got the microbes just sitting there waiting for stuff to do and stuff to come in so they can start producing things for you, metabolites and so on, but they're not getting anything, right? And then you're going through a good portion of the day where you're not activating the biggest metabolic component of your body, which is your microbiome. I think you have to hit the microbes with something in the morning, and just doing a nice dose of fiber is a great way to do it.
So I know you were talking about the prebiotics and the oligosaccharides and different things that feed the bifidobacteria and the what did you call it? The rhumnococcus.
Rhumnococcus. Yep.
So is that what feeds Akkermansia as well?
Yes. So actually, what feeds Akkermansia the most is polyphenols. So from berries, especially.
Okay, so I don't know why, and I look at a lot of gut maps. I swear to you, the people in the United States have the most deficient Akkermansia. Like it is wild how many people have just no Akkermansia in their gut, like zero. What do you think that's all polyphenol based? Is some of that like stress induced based? I know that Akkermansia really likes, it's one of the bacteria that really like mucus, right? So it likes
Yes.
when your gut is very mucousy. So I know a lot of times when people have issues with like secretory IgA, stress, things like that, you're going to have less Akkermansia. But it's becoming more and more popular, at least in functional medicine. But I see it a ton in people who have, not only weight issues, but just even like normal people now. Is it just because our polyphenols, like people are not eating enough polyphenols, or why do you think like what's going on with our Akkermansia? There's like a crisis.
Yeah.
There's a crisis in the
It,
United States with
it,
Akkermansia.
It absolutely is. It's like, where is your acromancia, right? It's like,
Right.
where's Waldo? It's totally missing.
It's crazy.
Um, it's crazy. And just to give people a little bit of hope, if you've had a gut test and it shows zero acromancia, it doesn't necessarily mean you don't have any acromancia at all in there. It just means that it's at such low levels where it's not detectable by that test, right? So because where people start to feel hopeless is they go, I don't even have any in there. How am I ever going to grow it? Well, it's still there. You can grow it. You can bring it back, and we actually have published studies on this where we showed in individuals that have undetectable levels of acromancia that with the right approach you can find now 100-fold increase in acromancia in as little as 3 weeks, right? So to go back to your question about what is happening, it's absolutely a problem of overfeeding and lack of polyphenols and fiber, right? So Akkermansia is one of those microbes that do fairly well when you're fasted as well, right? Because they are a mucin degrader, they live a little bit deeper in the mucus, and they actually degrade and feed off of the top layer of mucus. Now, that doesn't happen when the system is inundated with food, right? As food continues to come in, the other microbes are now getting their primary source of nutrients. So they're competing with the acromantia and not allowing the acromantia to function the way it should. When there's no food coming in and there's periods of fasting, and it doesn't take much, we're talking about a 12-hour period, right? So mostly overnight till the next morning. When there's periods of fasting, the acromantia then go, aha, there's no food coming in for the other competitors, but I can eat the mucus, so I'm going to grow. And I'm going to actually eat the mucus, and their eating of the mucus actually helps trigger the rebuilding of the mucus. So that's also another benefit to recycle the mucus layer, right? Which is supposed to recycle every 72 hours or so. And so we're missing all of that, right? By eating all the time, right? Where we hardly have 7, 8 hours of time where we're not eating something caloric into our system. And then we're not getting polyphenols. The studies show 450, 500 grams of polyphenols, which is about a pound of polyphenols a day, can dramatically increase acromantia levels. So this is a mix of berries, right? So blackberries, blueberries, cherries, things like that. You eat them throughout the day, strawberries, and you'll get your acromantia back, and you add a little bit of fasting as well.
So you're thinking mostly berries, so not like tons of like kiwi, cantaloupe, different colored fruits, vegetables. You just need berries. If you ate 400 grams of berries a day and fasted 12 hours, you could grow your Akkermansia back. You don't need to take pendulum Akkermansia or any of that jazz.
Right, you don't. And the thing is with the probiotic Akkermansia, so Akkermansias are what we call anaerobic microbe, right? For the audience that's not familiar, that means oxygen is toxic to it, right? And so it's really hard to grow it in a factory. It's really hard to put in a capsule. It's really hard for it to sit in the bottle. So it doesn't survive, and it doesn't survive the gastric system. It doesn't survive going through the small bowel. And so when you're taking a probiotic Akkermansia, it's not going in and living in your gut, right? So you're not populating or repopulating your Akkermansia. There may be some benefits from even the dead Akkermansia in terms of triggering some metabolic responses in your body. But if you really want to grow your own Akkermansia, your endogenous Akkermansia, you have to do those things. You have to add in some fasting, 12, 14 hours a day, fairly regularly, and then increasing the polyphenol consumption, especially from berries. That feeds Akkermansia quite a bit.
Okay. So then what other benefits are there other benefits of fasting on your gut? Because that was going to be my next question. I try to do at least a 24-hour fast every couple months. Every now and then I'll go a little cray and do like a 3-day fast. Now when people tell me I'm crazy, like my husband, I'm going to say, "Hey, I'm building my Akkermansia, be quiet." But as long as you do it in the right timing of your cycle, I think that's fine. But I do think that there's benefit to fasting, although I don't think you should do it all the time, especially like if you're listening to this and you have autoimmune adrenal issues. Sometimes fasting can be worse for you when your body's really stressed. But somebody who is a little bit more metabolically healthy, besides rebuilding your Akkermansia, my understanding is fasting also obviously gives your gut time to heal. You're not digesting food, so we can start trying to rebuild secretory IgA, rebuild, gut linings if we have a lot of leaky gut, things like that, work on autophagy so we get rid of the bad cells, we replace them with good cells. Would you agree? Like, is fasting good? How often should we fast? Is there like a point of diminishing return? Like after 24 hours, it doesn't matter. We're doing 72 just to punish ourselves. Like, tell us a little bit about fasting in our gut.
Yeah, so generally, I think fasting does have a measurable benefit to the gut and the gut microbiome. Fasting does and can increase diversity within the gut microbiome, and diversity is one of the best measures of a healthy microbiome. So that is a benefit to it. Um, for the most part, what you need is what we would call an intermittent fast, right? So, which means on a regular basis, you're experiencing something around 12 to 14, 15 hours a day of not having any food going into the system. I do that quite regularly, and I've done it for 7, 8 years now, and it feels very normal and regular to me. And during that period, like you said, when there's no food coming through, that's when all the repair and all that can happen, because dealing with food is a very taxing thing that is damaging to the gut, right? Just the presence of food alone, and then all of the bile that's released, and enzymes, and hydrochloric acid, and all, of course, all the things that come in with the food, right? All the chemicals and all of that stuff, all of that can be very damaging to the gut, and the gut has to recover from that process. It's no different than exercising or weightlifting, right? You can't weight lift 6 hours a day every day. You got to have periods of rest. And so for the recovery portion of it, and so, if we think about fasting as a period of recovery for the microbiome and for the gut, I think that makes it resonate with people a little bit more. I think a 24-hour fast occasionally can be really interesting, to reset some of the metabolic processes, to give your liver a little bit of a break as well. From doing all the things it has to do, and then also resetting the microbiome, and that can actually, for some people, I've seen this, and I can't quote a study on this, but for some people, I see a really significant reset to their microbiome. Like, for example, people who've been traveling, and you're traveling in places where your gut is just all messed up because you're eating weird things and you're in weird environments, right? For you, if you come back and you just do a 24-hour fast in your normal environment, that can be a significant reset. I think beyond 24 hours, you're starting to get diminishing return, because you don't want too much eating away at the mucus layer, and you don't want too many of the microbes that are dependent on nutrition coming in for their numbers to go too low, right? I think a 72-hour fast can be beneficial if you did it with fiber, right? So let's say you did a 72-hour fast every once in a while, and assuming your body can handle it and all that, and you're in the right state to be able to do it, but you're just taking a couple of doses of fiber each day and no other macronutrients, right? That could be really an interesting way. I did that once with like a 36-hour fast, and I found that to be really great. Like, I've done 24 hours every once in a while, and it feels good, especially if I've been making a lot of bad decisions on vacation, for example, right? I'm like, all right, I need a bit of a reset. I want things to feel better. So, I'll take a bunch of fiber and probiotics and prebiotics and all that, and then I'll jump into a 24-hour fast, and then I feel great at the end of that. I've gone 36 hours without any fiber or anything during it, but then I've also done it with a dose or two of fiber during it, and it feels much better. And you feel like your bowels move much better. You're clearing out much more things. Like you get a lot better bowel movements during that period of time too. So fiber can be, fasting can be a benefit.
Okay. So 24 hours, that's easy. That's like easy fast. You like, yeah, perfect. Okay. So all this is so fascinating. So I have a ton of questions that people wanted answered, and there's no way we're going to answer all of these. But I'm going to kind of go through and you can maybe give me some answers to some of them. Maybe we'll have to do this again. But can GLP-1s help with IBS-D? I have tons of GLP-1 questions. Like, do you think GLP-1s help with irritable bowel is one question. Do you think that they're harmful on gut motility? Do they worsen SIBO? These are a lot of the GLP questions. What are your thoughts on GLPs?
Yeah. So
Does it harm acromantia? There's another one.
yeah, so I think obviously there are certain people that can really benefit from GLP-1s. If you have severe metabolic syndrome and you're really morbidly obese and all that, that's going to be much more of a risk to your health than the risk factors of taking the GLP-1s. And so in those cases, I think absolutely you need to. For the people that are just trying to lose 20 pounds and they want to go to the GLP-1 agonist, right? There is a significant risk of constipation. That's a very common side effect within GLP-1s. And the reason why they actually create that constipation is because they bypass the gut-brain axis and they inhibit motility and slow down motility at the brainstem itself, right? And that's a very unusual process. So then it's hard to get the bowels moving. So then you could take more magnesium, you can take, the Miralax and things like that, and it's not going to activate it because the signals are not coming down from the brain. And when you slow down motility that significantly and you have SIBO, that could perpetuate SIBO in my book, because SIBO is heavily influenced by a reduction in gut motility, right? So you're making motility worse. So I think people who suffer from SIBO could potentially have a worse problem with it. Can it help with IBS-D? I mean, I think it can absolutely, sequester some of the symptoms of IBS-D, because IBS-D being people chronically having diarrhea. If you're on a GLP-1, you're going to slow down your motility so much, your bowels aren't going to move so much, you're not going to be eating a lot, so you're probably not going to have the same amount of diarrhea as you used to. But it's not solving the problem, because now it's really clear that IBS, whether it's D or C, is a gut-brain issue. It's an inflammatory issue in your enteric nervous system, which is the neurological system covering your digestive tract, which is, has more nerve endings than your spinal cord. It's a very complex neurological organ, and there's a significant amount of inflammation in that neurological system that's causing the weird firing of the nerves and all of the weird peristalsis and irritation in the bowels, right? So we now know that IBS is absolutely a gut-brain issue. It's not a primary gut issue, and so GLP-1s don't address that foundational part of it, or that root cause part of it. So they're not going to help with solving that as a problem. And I think that the issue of really losing appetite
Поехали.
and not eating enough, and if you're not
Все,
eating,
бери, времени
you're
мало.
likely not eating enough fiber either, right? And so that can have a
Чуть
long-term
нагнись.
effect on your
Вот.
gut.
И
And
улыбайся.
so I think, for the people that need to lose
Нагнись
100
чуть-чуть
pounds
ниже, да.
and, they're
Вот так вот.
diabetic and all of that stuff, by all means, I think it's a wonderful way to get that under control. But if you're trying to lose 20 pounds, 25 pounds, I would caution against that being the primary approach, because I think you could take better approaches than that.
Yeah, I agree. I think it depends on how you use it and the dosages. And I've always said this, if you use it in very low doses, it's for inflammation. You talk to somebody about fiber and protein, yada, yada. Then I've had a lot of successful, people take them. But yes, if you use it and you're just like, oh, I'm going to starve myself, then that is not the way to go. I have a lot of people who asked, why do I wake up bloated? What are the causes of bloating after eating? Which that's hard because waking up bloating and then being bloated after you eat are two very different things, right? But I think a lot of women, myself included, are kind of in this perimenopausal phase. And so we have this bloating. Now, I will say from an endocrinology standpoint, sometimes it can be a hormone issue, right? A progesterone, estrogen, testosterone issue, which highly affects your gut. And we didn't get into that ton, but that's what my book is all about, how estrogen, testosterone actually affect your gut. We could talk about that for an hour, but talk to people about the most common causes of bloating after eating. I think what I see probably is stomach acid issues, right? Gallbladder, like just insufficiency, insufficient digestive enzyme production, insufficient bile production, insufficient gastric acid production. Eating too quickly is what I see a lot. We're driving, we're standing, we're not setting, in a parasympathetic state so we can actually digest our food. And then maybe eating things that we have allergies or sensitivities to would be my thought. Can you think of anything else as far as bloating after eating?
Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. I think number one, the meal, what I call meal hygiene, which is the act of eating and the ritual of eating, we don't have that anymore. So, like you said, we're often in that sympathetic nervous state to when we eat, and that completely shuts off what we call the cephalic response, right? And the cephalic response to food is a really important aspect of getting all of the digestive juices and all that moving. So your saliva, your gastric acids, and then getting your brain ready to start sending in the motility signals to move the food bolus along, right? All of that has to be orchestrated for your body to deal with food. And then if you've ever taken antacids and you've been on protein pump inhibitors and all of these things, and then stress, of course, stress also inhibits hydrochloric acid, right? So let's just give a quick case example here. Let's say you're eating in a rush, or you haven't sat down and you haven't really, got yourself in the right frame of mind to eat properly. If you're eating in a rush and you're on the go and it's a stressful day, what tends to happen is you're swallowing and you're not chewing the food adequately, right? So you're getting less broken down food into your stomach, which then takes even longer to try to break down that food, even using the hydrochloric acid. On top of that, you're not releasing enough hydrochloric acid because you're stressed, and stress inhibits the release of hydrochloric acid. And so then the food bolus is sitting in the stomach and actually can ferment in the stomach, right? And when it ferments in the stomach, it causes gas. And when it causes gas, it can create enough pressure to start creating problems with the lower esophageal sphincter or the pyloric valve, and causing all of these issues that can create burping and belching and GERD and reflux and all kinds of things. And then this distension and this gastroparesis, where then your stomach is not emptying into the small intestine, right? So it's sitting there like a lump in your stomach longer than it should, and it's fermenting. And then when it finally dumps into your small intestine, you have inadequate bile, inadequate pancreatic enzymes, like you said. So the food's not being broken up, and your bowel is not moving the way it should. So it's sitting there too long, and it's getting fermented in the small bowel as well. And that's producing gas, both hydrogen, methane, all kinds of ammonia, if there's protein in there. And so we're missing all of this. And the other part, besides the meal hygiene that we talked about, is we're missing bitters, digestive bitters from our diet, right? Humans, since the dawn of time, have been consuming bitters one way or the other. And as a result of that, our digestive system developed this amazing orchestra of bitter receptors throughout the digestive tract to signal for food coming in and signal different processes. It's estimated that almost 50% of the digestive stimulus is coming from the binding of bitter receptors. So imagine if you have meals where you have zero bitters in it, which most people do, you're losing almost half of the impetus to digest, right? So you're getting undigested, putrefied, fermented foods in the wrong place in the wrong time. So bloating, indigestion, and all that is so common as a result of that.
So, what are your most favorite digestive bitters?
So there's one. There's a company called Just Thrive. They have a very complex digestive bitters with 13 different bitters in it, and I like that because the different digestive bitters trigger different responses in the body. Some upregulate their natural GLP-1s, right? Some upregulate glucose control, so it improves the liver function and causes the gallbladder to release more bile, or it causes pancreatic enzymes to be release more, or activation of the pancreatic enzymes. So you want a variety of bitters, and that's the one I use is the Just Thrive digestive bitters. I take the bitters about 10 to 15 minutes before the meal, and one of the things I really try to do to upregulate the cephalic response is I try to sit down and do a little bit of breathing before the meal. Right, try to get yourself into a parasympathetic state, and then have a little bit of a ritual or appreciation of the food that you're eating. And that's hard, right? But because people are on the go. But if you can do that, please do it.
So we can take our fiber and our bitters around the same time, like 5 to 10 minutes before we eat, and then we need to do our appreciation of food, our mindfulness, and then we eat. Okay. So yeah, I think those are all amazing answers. So I had a whole list of questions, but we're not going to be able to get to all of them, unfortunately. But I think everything that you told us was so powerful and beneficial. And do you have a lot of insight into hormone regulation with the gut? Like, do you know a lot about estrogen, testosterone, thyroid hormone, and how it plays with the microbiome?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think it's a really interesting two-way street, right? Where the hormones have an impact on the gut microbiome. Like we know when estrogen production is reduced, as you go into perimenopause, diversity in the gut microbiome reduces, right? Because estrogen feeds to some degree microbes in the gut. And then we also know that dysfunction in the gut microbiome can negate or hinder the production of some of the sex hormones. We know that thyroid hormone activation is dependent on the gut microbiome to a degree, right? And the activation of T4 to T3, which is based in the liver, but it is heavily influenced by the gut microbiome. So yeah, it's a really, really interesting connection between hormones and the gut.
Yeah, so maybe we can connect again and do a whole episode around that because I have some love to pick your brain about some questions that is coming out of my book. But so I end every podcast the same way. So I'm going to rapid fire 3 questions at you, and it's just like don't overthink it, whatever comes to your mind, and then we're going to wrap up with like having you tell people where they can meet you or where they can find you on social media or how we can find more out about what you do. But the first question is, what is one food that's most beneficial and why?
Fiber to me. So it's fiber, and it's feeding the gut microbiome and increasing diversity. And I'm good with fiber in any form.
What is your favorite fiber food?
For me, my favorite fiber food is sweet potatoes.
Okay, I love sweet potatoes. Yes. Okay.
It's absolutely delicious. Yeah.
Number 2, what is one thing that anyone could do to benefit their gut health that is 100% free?
Fasting.
I like
Yeah.
that
A little
too.
bit of intermittent
Fasting,
fasting.
mindfulness.
Costs nothing.
Cost nothing. And the third thing is, what is one thing you wish you would have known about your gut health 15 to 20 years ago that you would have done differently?
And this, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse, but I wish I knew how important fiber was even back then, right? And maybe even polyphenols, and how polyphenols actually act as a prebiotic. I would have been a lot more diligent about getting adequate levels of polyphenols into my system, and it has so many benefits for overall health. And I wish I knew that, and I wish I would have been much more diligent about consuming those two components.
I think those are wonderful answers. So, Karan, tell everyone like how they can find you, how they can, get more information about you. We'll put it in the show notes, but I know you have an Instagram page. Is there anywhere else you want people to go to support or find you?
Yeah, so my Instagram handle is Kiran Biome, Kiranbiome. I try to engage with people as much as I can on there. Of course, try to populate it with a lot of useful information. I also have a microbiome course that people can take that's been actually quite successful as people start wanting to learn more about the microbiome and then figure out all of the ways in which they can impact their microbiome. This is like a 6 or 7 module course that people can take at their own pace with lots and lots of resources like checklists and recipes and guides and all kinds of stuff, right? So they can take control of their own microbiome health. You can find out about that on my Instagram page as well. And then if you really want to learn about the skin microbiome and some of the things we touched on earlier, eczema and all of these things, acne, one of the companies I also co-founded is called Siv, S-I-V. It's a skin microbiome company. So the Instagram handle is Siv Care. And then Siv also has a YouTube channel that we are really building out to be the preeminent skin microbiome educational channel. So that's another place where people can get information as well.
So your course, is it for like lay people? Is it for providers? Is it for both? Like what is it geared towards?
It's designed layperson, but it's high level enough where we've had about 400 practitioners take the course. We've had over 1,000 consumers take the course, but we actually are launching a more specifically a practitioner course in late August, early September, which will be much more deep dive, much more around therapeutics and protocols and all that around all of the things related to the microbiome. So that'll be the practitioner course. That one's what is that one called? Oh, that's going to be the Microbiome Clinical Science Certificate course. This consumer course is called Build Your Resilient Gut, BYRG, and it's perfect for clinicians if they want to get some of the baseline stuff, understanding within the microbiome, kind of get what the latest things are within the microbiome, and then consumers if they want to empower themselves to like really take charge of their microbiome.
That is so fascinating. Well, thank you, Kiran, for coming on and just sharing all this information with my listeners. I think it's very impactful what you do. So thank you for all of that and just the educational piece. I know it's so powerful. So I love that you do that, and I'm looking forward to hopefully connecting with you again in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm seeing a part 2 and maybe even a part 3 on this. I'd be happy to come back whenever it works for you.
All right. Thank you.
The information presented, including any materials discussed, referenced, or linked within this podcast, are for general educational purposes only, not the practice of medicine. No doctor-patient relationship is formed from you listening to this podcast or utilizing any of the information provided. I am a doctor, but I am not talking to you as your doctor. The information provided is not intended to diagnose or treat health problems or take the place of the professional medical care provided by your doctor. If you are experiencing any health problems, including problems you believe have been touched upon in any respect within this podcast, you should consult your doctor about the problems without delay. You may ask your doctor whether he or she believes the information I have provided would be helpful to you, but you should still consult your doctor immediately and follow his or her medical advice as your treating physician. I'm just here to provide you basic knowledge about the issues we discuss so you are more aware of them and can better discuss them with your doctor. That's why we call it Back to the Basics. Join me on the next episode as we continue our journey.